I caught my wife cheating, and my stepkids told me to relax since I'm not their real dad. I divorced her and left them with nothing. Hello Reddit eyes plus here. I always believed in the sanctity of marriage. When I married Susan 5 years ago, I didn't just marry her. I married her kids, Jake and Emma too. They were 10 and 8 at the time, and their father had left the picture years ago. I stepped in, willingly, because I loved her, and I wanted to give those kids the life they deserved. I went to soccer games, helped with science projects, and made sure Christmases were magical. Sure, it wasn't easy. Being a stepdad comes with its challenges. They'd sometimes remind me, "You're not my real dad," especially when I set rules or denied something unreasonable. But I thought, they're just kids, they'll understand one day. But then came the betrayal. It started as little things. Susan began staying late at work more often. Her phone was glued to her hand, and she laughed at messages she wouldn't share with me. One night, I decided to do what I'd never done before, check her phone while she was in the shower. And there it was. Explicit messages and photos exchanged with her coworker. I felt sick. My whole world spun. I confronted her immediately. She didn't even deny it. Instead, she blamed me for being too controlling and said, "This wouldn't have happened if you made me feel wanted." It was the ultimate slap in the face. I had given everything to this family, my time, my money, my love. And now this? The breaking point came a few days later. I sat Jake and Emma down to tell them Susan and I were divorcing. I thought they'd be upset, maybe even cry. Instead, Jake shrugged and said, "Whatever, you're not our real dad anyway." Emma chimed in, "Yeah, you should just chill out. Mom says you're overreacting." Overreacting? That was it for me. I filed for divorce the next day. Thankfully, I had a solid prenup. Everything I brought into the marriage, my house, my savings, my car, was mine. Susan had always thought the prenup was a formality, something we'd never need. Well, it turned out to be the smartest decision of my life. During the proceedings, Susan demanded I continue supporting her children financially. I calmly reminded the court that they had a father, somewhere. I wasn't legally obligated to pay for kids who openly disrespected me and told me I wasn't their dad. The judge agreed. The look on Susan's face was priceless when she realized she wasn't getting a dime. She'd have to move out of my house, find a job that could actually pay the bills, and explain to Jake and Emma why their cushy lifestyle was about to vanish. The day they moved out was surreal. The house felt empty, but for the first time in years, it was also peaceful. I started picking up old hobbies, woodworking, hiking, and even taking a few cooking classes. I reconnected with friends who I'd drifted away from during my marriage. One evening, about 6 months later, I got a call from Susan. She was crying, telling me how hard things were for her and the kids. They'd moved into a small apartment, Jake had started acting out in school, and Emma was angry all the time. She begged me to help. "You made your bed," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Now you have to lie in it." She tried guilt. She said the kids missed me, but I knew better. They didn't miss me. They missed what I provided, and I wasn't about to be their safety net anymore. A year later, I heard through mutual friends that Susan's affair hadn't worked out. Her co-worker had dumped her as soon as the divorce was finalized. She was now working 2 jobs to make ends meet, and her once perfect image had crumbled. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I met someone new, a woman who appreciated me for who I was, not just for what I could provide. We're taking things slow, but for the first time in a long time, I feel genuinely happy. As for Jake and Emma, I hope they're okay. They're just kids after all, and their mom's choices weren't their fault. But I've learned an important lesson. Respect is earned, not owed, and blood isn't the only thing that makes a family. So when people ask if I regret walking away, my answer is always the same. Not for a second. Over time, I realized something important. Holding on to anger or resentment would only weigh me down. Susan and her kids were a chapter in my life, but they didn't define me. I chose to focus on what I could control. My happiness, my future, and the relationships that truly mattered. My new partner, Lily, was a breath of fresh air. She understood my past without judgment, and we built a relationship based on mutual respect and shared goals. She also had a young son, Ryan, from a previous marriage. But this time, I approached things differently. I made sure to establish healthy boundaries and took my time forming a connection with him. Ryan was a great kid, polite, curious, and funny. He reminded me of why I'd wanted to be a father figure in the first place. He didn't see me as a replacement for his dad, and I didn't try to be one. Instead, We bonded naturally over things like building model airplanes and Saturday morning cartoons. One afternoon, about 2 years after the divorce, I ran into Jake and Emma at a local grocery store. They were taller now, more grown up, but their expressions were guarded. Jake, who had always been the mouthy one, hesitated before saying, "Hi." It caught me off guard, but I smiled and asked how they were doing. Jake looked down, shuffling his feet. "Mom's struggling," he mumbled. Emma, standing beside him, added, "We miss how things used to be." For a moment I felt a pang of sympathy. These kids weren't to blame for their mother's mistakes, but I also knew I couldn't reopen that door. "I hope things get better for you," I said gently but firmly. "Take care of yourselves." They nodded and walked away. I could feel their eyes on me as I turned down another aisle. It wasn't closure exactly, but it was enough for me to let go of any lingering guilt. Fast forward to today, and my life couldn't be better. Lily and I got married last year in a small, intimate ceremony. Ryan was my best man, and my closest friends surrounded me. We recently bought a little house on the outskirts of town with a big yard and a workshop where I've been crafting furniture in my spare time. Ryan helps out, and I'm teaching him how to use tools safely. It's become our thing, a way to bond and create something tangible together. I sometimes think about the life I left behind. Not with sadness or regret, but with gratitude for the lessons it taught me. It showed me the importance of self-respect, of not settling for less than I deserve, and of finding joy in the right places. The story of Susan and her kids isn't one I tell often, but when I do, it serves as a reminder of how far I've come. Life has a funny way of teaching you lessons you didn't know you needed. Sometimes, the people you love the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. But if you're willing to walk away from what's hurting you, you might just find something better waiting on the other side. I didn't just survive the betrayal, I thrived because of it. And that, to me, is the ultimate revenge. This continuation ties up loose ends while providing a satisfying conclusion, focusing on the protagonist's growth and the fulfilling life he builds post-divorce. It reminds listeners that life goes on after betrayal, and happiness is always within reach if you're willing to pursue it.